Explorers, my name is Jasmine and I'm a part of the Balboa Park Cultural Partnership. And today we are so excited to have you join us for our virtual Explorer experience with the Balboa Park Conservancy.
Welcome, Explorers. My name is Pam Crooks and I'm a volunteer with the Balboa Park Conservancy, and we're going to go on a tour of the park today. Actually just a tour of the historic area of the park. And I know you know a lot about the museums, and I'm so glad you're Explorer members. I am one as well. But I'm hoping to maybe share some information that you don't know about the history of the park and some kind of fun trivia today. So let me just tell you a little bit more about myself. I have been either an employee or a volunteer at Balboa Park for 44 years. And I absolutely love it. I never ever get tired of coming here. Every time I visit, I see something new and different. And as I said, I'm currently a volunteer with the Balboa Park Conservancy. I have been for many, many years. And I volunteer at the Balboa Park Visitor Center, and I'm a tour guide, obviously. And I've written some guidebooks to the park.
Hi, Gary, what are you doing? Okay.
Hello.
This way.
Welcome.
Go this way.
What I wanted to tell you in this spot, I'm going to take you to a few different locations and talk while I am letting you look at the beautiful view behind me. And so obviously you're looking at the lily pond in the botanical building. And this gives me an opportunity to tell you about the early history of the park. First of all, it was set aside as parkland in 1868 when there were fewer than 4,000 residents in San Diego. This is a just amazing thing to me because they set aside 1,400 acres for Balboa Park. It wasn't called Balboa Park in those days, they simply called it City Park. But they didn't have any money to do anything with it, so it just sat here as vacant land for a long, long time. Now 1,400 acres, just to put that in perspective, today it's just a little under 1,200 acres. We've lost a few acres around the edges over the years, but it's still larger than Central Park in New York and Golden Gate Park in San Francisco. A lot of people are surprised to hear that. But again, coming back to that date in 1868, when this was such a very small town in the southwestern corner of the United States, to set aside this huge tract of land for a public park. Well, again, they didn't have any money to do anything with that land, and it sat here vacant until in the late 1800s, about 1892 to be precise. A young woman from San Francisco, from the Bay Area, had moved here, and she came as a teacher. She loved growing things, she loved being outdoors, and she soon left her teaching job to open a nursery, but she ran out of space for her nursery, and so she decided to approach the city about using some of this vacant land. Her name was Kate Sessions, and you've probably heard that name. It's quite well known in San Diego, but you may not know that she started the first landscaping efforts in Balboa Park. And again, this was in 1892. She made an arrangement with the city where she could use 32 acres of land. It was over on the west side, close to where the Marston House is, to grow her plants for her nursery. And in exchange, she agreed to plant 100 trees a year in Balboa Park and another 300 trees around the city of San Diego. So that continued until formal landscaping efforts began in like 1903. So that was the beginning of the what you would call development of Balboa Park, I would say. So now, why are we looking at the botanical building? Because when I said the development formal landscaping started in 1903, again, that was mostly on the west side, not much happening in this area, until in 1909, the local Chamber of Commerce suggested that San Diego host a World's Fair, if you will, an exposition to celebrate the completion of the Panama Canal, which was going to take place in 1915. Well, the Panama Canal was going to obviously connect the Pacific and the Atlantic Oceans, give people a way to get from one side to the other, and San Diego was the first great port in the United States north of the Panama Canal. So this was going to introduce people to this fact and also hopefully bring thousands and thousands of people to San Diego to see what we have to offer. Well, they did put this exposition together, and it was called the Panama California Exposition. Now, there were a number of buildings that were put into the park for this first exposition, and the building behind me, the botanical building, was one of those. It is one of the handful of original buildings that still exists. Now, I'm here to tell you it needs some restoration, and I'm very proud that the Balboa Park Conservancy is raising funds to restore that building and the plantings inside the boxes to restore it back to the way it was originally. And today we're not going to be able to go inside. As you know, most of the buildings in the park, in fact all of the interior of buildings except for the visitor center, are closed right now because of COVID. So that's kind of sad, and we have so many visitors coming into the visitor center that are devastated because they can't visit our beautiful botanical building. But anyway, let's take a look now at the lily pond just for a second, because I want to tell you a couple of other things. First of all, after the first exposition closed, not too long after that, World War I started. And the park was taken over by the military, and they actually taught sailors how to row boats on this lily pond. And I will tell you a little bit more about a second exposition further on the tour, but I will tell you that 20 years after that first exposition, the decision was made to hold a second one in 1935. And that was to help the economy recover from the Great Depression. And I'll tell you more about that. But in between those two expositions, you had World War I, and the park was taken over, as I said, by the military during that period of time. So this is just one of the uses of the park facilities, and that was to teach sailors how to row boats. All right, let's go to a next stop and see what I can tell you about those buildings that we're going to be talking about. So I've just touched on the 1935 exposition, which is, as you know, happened about, 20 years after that first exposition in 1915. San Diego, just like the rest of the country, but maybe a little bit later, was really experiencing the effects of the Great Depression. And they needed something to really help San Diego get through that. So they decided in 1934, May of 1934, that they were going to put on a second exposition here in the park. And they would use the original buildings that were still here, most of them were still here, and they would add a whole other section, 2 sections of buildings. And they would add new exhibits. So this was one of them, and this is called Zorro Gardens because it was the site of a nudist colony, believe it or not. You may have heard this already since you are familiar with the park. And there was a fence, a wooden fence across the back of it, and it had holes in it at different heights. And I've actually seen the ticket, the physical ticket from the ticket book for that exposition that says nudist colony. And people could hand over their ticket and they could peer through holes in the fence and watch the basically actors and actresses going about their daily chores and just enjoying meals and preparing meals and that sort of thing. Au naturel, or almost au naturel. We will imagine. But there was a queen of the nudist colony called Zorrine. And so that's where that name comes from, Zorro Gardens. And I hope that was some new information for you. Again, I just find this one of the hidden treasures in the park, and I hope that you will come and enjoy this often. All right. All right, we are now standing, as you probably can hear, overlooking Park Boulevard and across to the Rose Garden and the Desert Garden. And you're probably wondering, well, why am I stopping here? For a couple reasons. First of all, I wanted to tell you, you've probably seen bus number 7 many times running up and down Park Boulevard. It goes all the way out to La Mesa and downtown. There used to be a streetcar line, streetcar number 7, that went right here as well. And this was one of the major entrances to the exposition. And I think that's kind of fun. And I wish they still had the streetcars. It would be so neat to have that going down Park Boulevard. But anyway, the little bridge there, of course, takes you over to those 2 gardens. And while you're over there, for something a little bit different, besides looking at our beautiful rose garden, which has over 2,000 rose bushes, and the desert garden, which has, I think, somewhere 3,100 different varieties of cactuses and succulents. Just an amazing collection. I think we'll also take a moment. I don't know if you can see it here, but if you look all the way across, you can see what Balboa Park looked like. But anyway, the little bridge there, of course, takes you over to those two gardens. And while you're over there, there's something a little bit different. Besides looking at our beautiful rose garden, which has over 2,000 rose bushes, and the desert garden, which has, I think, somewhere 3,100 different varieties of cactuses and succulents, and just an amazing collection. I would like you to also take a moment when you're there. If you look all the way across, you can see what Balboa Park looked like. Maybe when Alonzo Horton came to San Diego, and then the decision was made a few years later to set aside this land as a public park, or before Kate Sessions came and started planting these gorgeous trees and flowers and things to, landscape the park. So it was natural. It was just like our canyons near where we live now. It was, definitely chaparral and, just low, dry, tolerant plants that are native to this area. So you can see that in that canyon, which is called Florida Canyon. On the other side is another section of Balboa Park, and that's where most of the recreational facilities are located. So you'll find 3 golf courses over there if you include the Frisbee or disc golf course. There are tennis courts and Olympic-sized swimming pool and soccer fields and bocce courts and a velodrome. And it's in general called the Morley Sports Complex, Morley Field Sports Complex. And that is in Balboa Park. And there's another area almost as big on the west side, and we'll talk about that when we get closer to that area as well. Just so you know, I know explorers spend a lot of time in the Central Mesa area of the park, where all of our wonderful museums and arts organizations are located, but there are so many other areas of Balboa Park to explore. There are miles and miles of hiking trails in Florida Canyon, for example, and some as well on the west side. So just stop by the visitor center and get a map and explore some of those areas that you might not be as familiar with, and see what Balboa Park used to look like many, many years ago. We are standing at the entrance of Spanish Village Arts Center, and again, as explorers, many of you have probably spent a lot of time in this beautiful courtyard, which dates back to 1935, when they decided, the people planning the exposition, that they wanted to have a charming area for cafes and souvenir shops that would represent a Spanish village. So that's why they built this. And today it houses 37 working artist studios where they are doing their crafts, blowing glass or making pottery, doing oil painting, watercolors. A lot of them offer classes. And right now I'm happy to say about half of the studios are open. So even though museums are closed because the Spanish Village Art Center is basically an open air courtyard, it is okay to come in and visit, and please do come and see these artists. And at the back of the Spanish Village is a coffee cart, Daniel's Coffee, which is great. They have hot and cold drinks, and there's some nice places to sit inside this beautiful courtyard. So I highly recommend you visit. This is one of the most beautiful places to take photographs in Balboa Park, and one of the most historic spots as well, with the lily pond, and beyond that, the arcade that connects the hospitality building and the Casa de Balboa. But while we're here, I've already talked a little bit about what this lily pond was used for during World War I, but I don't think I've told you that the park was taken over by the military after the second exposition as well, and was used as an extension of the U.S. Naval Hospital, which was already in Balboa Park by that time. And it was used to help recovering sailors who came home from the Pacific and were getting therapy. So it was used basically as a therapy pool during the Second World War, and I think that's really a neat thing to know. If you can imagine, the Natural History Museum that we just looked at was used as wings of the Naval Hospital, with hospital beds in all those open areas. They took out the exhibits, obviously, and it was just incredible what we had to do, because San Diego is a very important Navy, Navy town during the war, and so we had to use everything we could to take care of our sailors. So this is part of what was used for. I think that's kind of an interesting story. I can tell you another little story too. I think she's focusing in now on the beautiful lilies, on the lily pads. And I have a great story about that. So you can see over to the right is the House of Hospitality. We're going to talk about that in just a few minutes when we get to the plaza. But that's where the visitor center is and the Prado restaurant, okay? So in the second floor of the House of Hospitality, there's this wonderful meeting room called the Loggia. And in October 1935, Franklin and Eleanor Roosevelt came to Balboa Park. And this was just after Roosevelt had dedicated the Hoover Dam. And so Roosevelt himself, Franklin, was being hosted at a luncheon with journalists down in the main area on the first floor. But Eleanor was being hosted at a women's luncheon on the second floor in the Loggia room. So the women were very excited about this, and we've got a picture of all the women in their hats and their gloves, and seated around this beautiful table with flower arrangements in the center of the table. Well, what happened was it was a very hot day, and for those of you who know San Diego in October, we can get some very hot, dry Santa Ana weather. So they had these beautiful floral arrangements ready to go, but because it was so hot and dry, the flowers wilted. And they were just panic-stricken. What are we going to do? These flowers look terrible. So they said, oh gosh, well, we've got flowers in the lily pond. There are lilies that are blooming right now. So they sent someone over to harvest some lilies from the lily pond, and they dipped them in wax to keep them from wilting and arranged them on the table where they had the luncheon for Eleanor Roosevelt. And I think that's just such a charming story. And I like to imagine maybe it was some kids that were there with their moms, who were preparing for the luncheon that they sent over to just kind of climb into the lily pond and get those lilies. I don't know if that's true, but I love that story. So, we're standing now in the plaza that leads up to the Old Globe Theater. And actually, it's more than one theater. It's 3 theaters. And as explorers, you probably all know this, but I just wanted you to be aware that the Old Globe had its beginnings here in Balboa Park during that 1935 exposition. So it was one of the added attractions, and they built the replica of the Old Globe in London, and they had shortened performances of some of Shakespeare's plays. They had dancers on the green, and they had a cafe called Falstaff's Tavern. And it was all, very popular. Queen Elizabeth would come out every now and then and hold court, and it was just a real fun thing. Lots of neat pictures from that era. Well, after the exposition closed in 1935, I'm not sure how soon after, but they were going to tear that building down. And there was a community theater group that literally stopped the wrecking ball to save that building, the Old Globe, and started a theater company, which exists today, and now has expanded to include 3 theaters, a smaller theater in the ground, as well as an outdoor festival stage, which you can't see too well over here on my left. But that was added in 1978 after the Old Globe burned, same year that the Casa de Balboa burned. Both of those fires, we don't know for sure who started them. No arsonist was ever caught. But both of those wonderful original facilities burned to the ground. So again, huge outpouring of support for the Old Globe. A lot of money was raised. But in the meantime, they wanted to go forward with their summer Shakespeare Festival. So they got permission to build this outdoor theater. And then when the building reopened, they didn't want to give that up. San Diegans didn't want to give up their Shakespeare outdoors under the stars in the summer. So they got permission to keep that theater. And it's an absolutely fantastic place. And, of all the evening summer things that we mourn right now because of COVID, that's one of them. This plaza in the summer, those 3 theaters going, 1,500 people can be gathering and going from, in and out of different theaters. And there's a restaurant here, Lady Carolyn's Pub in the center. And it's just a very vibrant place. But we'll see that again. I'm sure we will. And I'm sure that the Old Globe also has great programs online that we should check out. So, okay, so I don't know if you can hear behind me those chimes. I was just talking about the chimes in the California Tower, and they're playing right now. They play every day at noon for a longer period of time. So we're quite fortunate to be able to hear this while we're looking at the facade of the California building. So on the facade are statues of people, men, who were important to the history of California. At the very top is Father Whenever Serra, who was the person who, on behalf of the Spanish crown, founded a series of missions starting in Baja California and going all the way up the coast of California, all the way to Northern California. We have one here in the city of San Diego, and there are others in San Diego County as well. But on the right, middle of it is Juan Rodriguez Brio, who's the Portuguese sailor who came into San Diego Bay. It wasn't called San Diego then. He came into the bay in 1542. So he well preceded Whenever Serra. He was the first European to actually come into San Diego at that point. I won't try to name the others, but they're all important figures from the history of California. We're standing now in Alcazar Garden, one of the most beautiful gardens in the park. It's a formal garden as opposed to some that are just planted more naturally like we saw in Zorro Gardens. This is a result of the 1935 exposition. There was a garden here during the 1915 exposition, but it looked different. It was not the same. And the principal architect of the second exposition was a man named Richard Radka. And he had traveled extensively in southern Spain, so you see a lot of the Moorish influence in some of his projects that he did for the 1935 exposition, and this is one of them. So you see these just tinkling fountains made out of tiles, you see these formal beds with the flowers, and the pergola here, and of course the very best view of the California Tower for taking pictures is right here. And I'm proud to bring you to this park today because it hasn't looked so great lately. And I always previously sent visitors here when I was volunteering in the visitor center, or my own family and friends when they visited. But sadly, in the last few years, it had suffered quite a bit of neglect. But recently, the Conservancy, along with some other partners in the park and foundations, raised the funds to restore this beautiful garden. So what you're seeing today is a much, much more beautiful, much more reminiscent of what the gardens looked like in 1935, and I'm very, very proud of that. So I hope you'll stop by the booth here and say hi to our volunteer. I volunteer there, not every day, but I'm here usually once a week or so, either here or inside, and I look forward to seeing you there. We're ending our tour here in the courtyard of the House of Hospitality building, which is, I think, has to be my favorite building in Balboa Park for several reasons. First of all, it's where Eleanor Roosevelt had her luncheon, and that was upstairs in this building in 1935. And it's where the visitor center is, where I volunteered for about 20 years. And it's where the Prado restaurant is. But it's also because this building, of all the other buildings that have been reconstructed, this building was reconstructed historically inside and out. So outside, it looks just the way it did in 1915. Inside, including this courtyard, resembles the way it looked exactly in 1935. So that is a very special reconstruction project. In fact, the organization, the House of Hospitality organization that later became the Balboa Park Conservancy, won numerous awards, national and state awards, for this reconstruction project. And the city of San Diego, of course, was very, very involved in that. So I'm very proud to have been able to share some of the things I know about Balboa Park today, and to tell you that this is a good time to come to the park despite the museums being closed. You must come and enjoy our beautiful gardens and outdoor spaces and see some of the construction projects that are happening right now. And you'll see what you have to look forward to in the not very distant future. Thank you.
we have Radka from the Balboa Park Conservancy here with us.
Hi, Jasmine. Hi, everybody.
We do have one question, so I'll start off with that one. Great tour. Is the organ original to the 1915 Expo?
Yes, yeah, the organ pavilion. The organ, yes, it is, but it was enlarged. It was not quite as, it didn't have quite as many pipes as it has now. It is supposedly either the largest outdoor organ or the second largest in the world. But yes, the organ is original, but definitely was enlarged and restored since 1915.
Nice. And also, I know that she didn't go over this in the video, but I know that the World Beat Center was made from a water tank. Was the Centro de Cultura also?
Centro Cultural de la Raza, yes, to water tanks, like water towers, yes.
Amazing.
Do we have any other questions?
Is there a House of Mexico in the International Cottages area?
Is actually the House of Mexico will be part of the new cottages that are being built. There are a total of 5 new cottages that are in construction currently that will house 8 nations, and House of Mexico will be one of them. Some of the cottages will be shared, 2 nations sharing, and then some will be single. The interesting part about the new cottages is, at least for California, is that they will all have basements, which we rarely see in San Diego.
Nice, that's gonna be exciting. Will there be anything in the basements, or are they just basement?
I wonder if it'll be storage space, mainly.
Amazing.
As you know, the cottages are quite small.
Oh yeah, they're very tiny.
The national houses.
Yeah, amazing. And what are places that are open to eat in the park right now?
So the places to eat, there are actually several. So the Prado restaurant, the Prado Perk, so you can get coffee in the morning. The Tea Pavilion next to the Japanese Friendship Garden. Panama 66 has a grab and go cart that is open, I believe, daily. Cravology is open in the Fleet building, even though the Fleet Science Center is not open, Cravology is open. Daniel's Coffee Cart was already mentioned. And the World Beat Center does offer grab and go lunch as well. So there are still opportunities to have food in the park.
I just grabbed lunch at the World Beat Center this past weekend, so it was amazing. My first time there, and I have to go there all the time now. It's amazing.
Great.
And also, is the Naval Hospital and VA Historical Museum part of the Balboa Park?
The Navy Hospital itself, no. The museum that we have that is part of the cultural partnership as well is the Veterans Museum of San Diego that is located on the east side of Park Boulevard.
Nice. And can you tell us more about the restoration for the Botanical Building?
The restoration of the Botanical Building, yes, that is sort of the major project, the first major project that the Conservancy is undertaking, and it definitely has taken a lot of effort to raise funds to restore the building, which has suffered some termite damage, rust, and also due to neglect. And there were funds dedicated by the state of California. It's over $8 million plus some other funds. And as you know, the Botanical Building right now is closed and it may not reopen. It may go directly into the renovation phase. If you would like more detail, there is a lot of detail about the renovation project plus the history of the building on our website. I would encourage you to go to balboaparkconservancy.org and click on the button what we do, and then you will see this major project.
And we're going to answer a couple more questions before we wrap this up. Our next question is, any dates for the Mingay Museum opening?
Not any set dates. The date I think that we knew pre-COVID that was mentioned was possibly May or springtime of 2021. But there is definitely construction going on around outside and also the interior of the Mingay. So construction, thankfully, is going well now in the park while it's fairly quiet.
Yeah. And where are the Zorro Gardens?
The Zorro Garden is located between the Fleet Science Center and Casa de Balboa. So it is located near the large fountain, the Bear Evanson Fountain, which is currently under construction as well. But the closest place to park probably would be behind the Fleet Science Center. So that would be my suggestion. I would encourage everyone to stop by, again, the visitor center, outdoor or indoor. We can give you a map, point you to the gardens, and send you on your way.
Awesome. And our last question is, how can someone donate?
Definitely, we would appreciate donations, or if you would like to get involved, become a member of the Conservancy, become a volunteer. I would direct you to our website, balboaparkconservancy.org, or stop by at the visitor center and we can definitely give you some brochures or information about the Conservancy. And thank you very much. I would like to also thank Pam Crooks, our volunteer and tour guide, who recorded the guided tour through the park. And we hope to open or start offering our guided tours again this fall, perhaps in small groups. We will either have public free tours as we offered pre-COVID, and we will also have paid custom tours for small groups, reservation-based.
Thank you. And thank you so much for answering these Q&As. I know it's a lot, but it's so fun to be able to learn more and more about the park.
Thank you. It was a pleasure and to share Balboa Park with everyone. And so please stop by on your next walk in the park.
Awesome. And thank you, explorers, for tuning on in for our virtual explorer experience with the Balboa Park Conservancy. We hope you enjoyed this experience and we can't wait to see you again next time.